good afternoon, good evening. We got it. We're recording now. It's a pleasure to have every one of you here for lighter approaches to the conservation standards. I would like to take a minute and acknowledge past, present, and emerging indigenous and traditional custodians, elders, and ancestral spirits of the territories where we live and work. And I'm going to say it in Spanish because my custodians, elders, and ancestral spirits speak Spanish. Reconocemos a los guardianes indígenas y tradicionales, sabios y a los espíritus ancestrales de los territorios donde vivimos y trabajamos, pasados, presentes y nacientes. Okay, welcome everybody. The objective of this session is to have you learn about the progress of the LIDAR CS initiative, or the Conservation Standards Initiative, and provide feedback to help shape our products, the ones we are already working on. And if we go to the agenda, we will have a very brief part for introductions, and I will be grateful if one of my colleagues can put the link to the Google Slides. We also will have an overview of the LIDAR CS initiative, who's involved and what we're trying to do. Then we will be looking for at the product, the drafts, and we will be trying to harness some feedback from you. This will be in smaller groups. We will then come back and have an overall reflections on this process, this initiative, look at the next steps, and finally have an evaluation for this session. So what we're going to do now to help with the introduction is if you could all go to slide number 4, it should look like the one on the screen. Please let me know if you have problems, or let somebody know through the chat if you have problems to join us in the slide deck.
Sorry, Armando, I lost the presentation, but I'm getting it back.
Don't worry, don't worry. Okay, this is a world of coffees and teas, of apples and bananas. So we would like to know where you find yourself. So to do it, if you see down below in the notes, please select a number and put your name there. If you feel like there's numbers are missing, just write down your number or put enter and write your number there. Then grab a colored Post-it, write your number on it, and move it into the grid. Where do you feel more comfortable if we were to take these 2 dimensions, apples and bananas, coffee and tea?
Do we get to put both? Or I guess we do kind of if we're in the bananas and coffee. That's where we're comfortable.
You can also, yeah, you can also position, I mean, you're using those 2 dimensions, but you can also position yourself further to the middle or towards one or the other, according to your preferences. Oh, I see a lot of movement.
So number 11 is right in between all of them.
Yeah, right in the middle.
And I think they changed their shape to a circle. That's Nick, of course. Yeah.
Of course.
It's just bad mousing. It's bad mousing. I couldn't grab the damn thing to move it. It's distorted.
Had to be different.
Just clumsy.
More coffee drinkers than tea, it seems, although it's fairly even. Seems like slightly more.
Yeah, we could do an analysis afterwards if tropical countries tend to go to bananas or the other way around. It'll be interesting. Geographic
Creating
distribution of preferences.
Down.
Yeah. Thank you, Caroline.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be using Google Slides. So this is an idea to get some training, rapid training on how to move things, how to write on little Post-its or little squares, and to move them around. So if you feel like you're not getting it or you have some trouble, please let us know through the chat, and we will be able to help you.
I
View
did
only
see
access.
some people said they have view only access. Let me just make sure I apologize for that. It should be.
Settings are updated. If folks could just hit
Yeah.
refresh, that should be fine.
Great.
Thank you, Vinaya. What about now? Natalie did it. Quinn, Brenda, did it work?
We have 34 people in the slide deck, and we've got 48 people on the call. So there may be a few people who still need to join the slide deck.
I'll put the link to the slide deck again in the chat box in case anybody missed it.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you all to keep on writing, but I do see like there's basically no pattern. We're equally distributed along these two dimensions. Quick analysis. I'm gonna get Varsha on this and get her to analyze this data a little bit better. But yeah, I do feel like we're equally distributed among them, and there's a lot of people in the middle, so it's really interesting. Obviously number 11 is right in the middle of everything, but the rest are between the two dimensions.
It's a situational context. In the morning, I like coffee. In the afternoon, I like tea. I mean,
Yeah, I didn't take in.
right?
Yeah, that's right. I did not put in the time dimension. That's an important one. Thank you, Nick. Okay. Well, just welcome everybody again. Thank you for doing this. You will see that it's very useful for what we have planned for the breakout groups. And I just want you to see our team. That is, we work with the Conservation Measures Partnership and CCNet. You are all part of getting this initiative implementing and with high impact. And our smaller core team is built by Caroline, Stem, Ashley, Marsha, Vinaya, and myself from FOS, and Will from WWF. Okay, welcome, and over to you, Marsha.
This is Marsha.
Okay, so I'm going to give a quick overview of what we mean by lighter conservation standards. So first of all, what is the problem that we're trying to address? So many of us in the conservation standards community have found that some people choose not to use the conservation standards because they perceive the standards as being very complex and time consuming. And in some cases, they think that the conservation standards is only appropriate to use if a team has a lot of time and a lot of money. And so the purpose of this lighter conservation standards initiative is to develop, enhance, and present conservation standards materials in an accessible way that addresses these users' concerns. And our target audience is coaches or project managers and team leaders who are already familiar with the conservation standards. We're not going to be covering any of the basics. So how do we define lighter conservation standards? So what we mean is that we're trying to simplify the conservation standards process for the conservation project team. So not necessarily for the coach, because sometimes simplifying things for the team means doing more preparation work as the coach, by doing one or more of the following. So you can keep all of the elements sub-steps, but offer simpler tools or processes so that you can get through all of the steps more quickly. So, for example, identifying highest risks rather than doing the full risk analysis. Or you could explain more clearly what tools or processes to use under what circumstances. And we have, because there is some guidance related to keeping all of the elements, we've taken more, at this point, more that second approach of looking at different circumstances and looking at what tools and processes to use. You can clarify what's recommended versus absolute must-haves, generally using language that's appropriate to the target audience, emphasizing basic principles like understand the situation rather than the tools, such as situation model, and relying more on knowledgeable people in place of written sources of evidence. So this is our timeline. As many of you know, we sent out a survey, and several of you participated in that survey. So we used that to identify some opportunities to get input from all of you, to gather information about what products currently exist. The existing products tend to take more of that, do the full process, but do it in a lighter way approach. So we reviewed those surveys. We had a couple of virtual sessions that some of you participated in to analyze the results and get some input from you all. And based on that, we've been working on initial product development. And so now in these two sessions, we want to get your input. It is November, so we are a little bit ahead of schedule because it says here December to January, so that's good. And then we will be, after these sessions, finalizing some products and asking the guidance review committee to look at those and give us feedback and rate those so that we can post them and share them with the community.
All right, great. Thanks,
And
Marcia.
I think that's it for me.
Yep. So I'll take over from here and share with you. Right now, we're going to explain a little bit more some of the processes we've used to get community input, and then share some drafts that we've developed. We'll share those right now in plenary, but then your breakout session is going to be to look at those drafts and be an opportunity to provide feedback and input on those. So, but first, just to summarize what we've done to try to bring in your all's perspective to date. Marcia mentioned that we did do a survey of the community, and here we were looking for a little bit reasons behind why a lighter approach is desired in some circumstances, trying to understand where it's appropriate to take a lighter approach and where it's not, and get some of your ideas about examples and resources out there. So so we put together, we shared this in the in a feedback session or an input session that we had with the community, just the results from this. But basically, there was kind of agreement across the community that there are options for taking lighter approaches across all steps, some steps less so than others. But we've kind of taken that into account in thinking about where we might take a lighter approach and where not. And then we also got examples of adaptation and resources. So as Marcia mentioned, one of the things we did with all the resources that we received from you all is just create a pretty simple Google Doc where we listed all the resources, a description, some notes for ourselves, and eventually we'll be cleaning this up and turning it back to you as one of the products coming out of this. We've also been in touch with people who are trying to do lighter approaches within their organizations. So in particular, Phyllis Ratchler from WWF and Will Beale have been really helpful in sharing with us the approaches that WWF has taken. And Phyllis has put a lot of time and effort into building a website. That's a potential model for us to look at. And also, I guess, sharing with us how they've tried to combine the programmatic with the operational rollout of WWF's version of the conservation standards. So at the end of September, we had a community input session. We had 2 working sessions of, I think, an hour and a half or 2 hours. And across those sessions, we had 23 participants. We went through several different exercises. It was mostly really just to very much an input session. We shared different scenarios and asked the teams or the groups to think about what are the key tools and processes for these different scenarios, what are some shortcuts and tips, what are some examples or resources. We developed these scenarios largely because we thought about all sorts of different dimensions of how to structure developing a product for this lighter CS initiative. And in the end, we kind of landed on, there are so many different dimensions that it's really hard to choose the right one. And so we opted for choosing some common scenarios, though we recognize we're not going to cover every scenario. And kind of an idea this group has is maybe over time, it'd be really cool to develop more scenarios if we can get kind of a structure in place, and then even crowdsource it out to the CS community and get start developing other scenarios. But we also use this input session to run by the community some ideas we had of potential products, and got votes on those. And along those lines, I think this is what we heard in terms of priority products that the community would like to see. So an orientation chart, we were talking about basically a chart or a reference guide of the CS steps. And this would have suggestions of the highest priority ones to complete for a lighter CS approach, and kind of clarifying what the pros and cons of taking a lighter approach. The Easy CS workbook, kind of a complementary thing too. Actually, I'm just gonna show, these are the 3 things that we're kind of melding together. You'll see in the products that we've started developing. So the Easy CS workbook is more about it's kind of the bare minimum that teams should do, but with links to go deeper for if you want to go deeper. So it's kind of we've been talking about this choose your own CS adventure analogy for that. And then these tip sheets, which is really where we see kind of taking, if we tell, or if the orientation chart or the Easy CS workbook says that, well, if you're in this condition, you should do a situation model. The tip sheets would then go into a little more detail and say, here are some lighter approaches for doing a situation model, and here are the pros and cons of taking those lighter approaches. So we've combined all those things, and we have looked at them across these, or the plan is to look at them across these different scenarios here. We have a few scenarios that are about the steps 1 and 2, developing a plan and getting under different conditions and getting stakeholders to agree on the plan. We have some more pointed scenarios where maybe a team is at the step 4, they're looking to reflect and adapt, or maybe they just want a monitoring plan for an existing strategy, or they're looking to identify indicators for their targets. And then we also intend to include just at a bare minimum, or what would be the bare minimum that you should do if you were going through the full cycle, a quick iteration first time through. And also several of us, I'm sure several of you have found yourself in this situation where you just want to get teams on board, or individuals. And so you're trying to draw them in and generate interest in the process, but not necessarily trying to get a full product or go through the whole cycle. And then I just want to mention, but not spend a lot of time on this, that we looked at these different scenarios here. This is an internal document really, but looking at the different scenarios and looking across the steps and thinking about what are the key steps, processes, tools to include for the different scenarios. And we're using this as kind of our guide for what we put together in the products. And with that, I'm going to, I think, turn it over to Vinaya.
Thanks, Caroline. Hi, everyone. So as Caroline set up, we had a lot of input from you all and others as to where to get started and how to proceed with developing products. So when we started developing products to respond to those inputs, we kept coming back to this analogy of using a cookbook and kind of equating the conservation standards to the ultimate cookbook. And as all of you know, when you have a cookbook and you have a recipe, you have a dish that you want to make, and then you have instructions for how to make it, and then a list of ingredients for what you'll need to make that dish. However, as I'm sure the cooks on the line will be very familiar with, you may not always have the ingredients that you need, or you may be cooking for vegetarians or people with allergies that require you to modify the recipe somewhat. If you're making tomato soup, you're going to need tomatoes, right? But you might not like garlic, or you might not have parsley at hand, or maybe you don't like soup as salty as some others, so you might want to cut back or modify the amount of salt you put in. What's nice about a cookbook and recipes is that you have kind of the basic ingredients and process, but you can modify it depending on your circumstances or your preferences. And likening that to the conservation standards, we really see conservation standards as, oh, if you go back one more slide, as kind of the ultimate recipe for doing good conservation practice. But all teams have constraints, and more often than not, there are some limitations that a team has to contend with. So in those circumstances, what kind of modifications to that full recipe can you make in order to achieve what you're striving for? So with that analogy in mind, we've mocked up a couple of examples for this Easy CS workbook, or the ingredients of that workbook that capture these different scenarios that Caroline just walked us through. So here's one example. And as I go through these examples, these mock-ups, if you have initial reactions, initial thoughts, or questions, please note them, jot them down, because this is exactly what we're going to ask for feedback on when we get into the breakout groups. So I won't stop for questions now. I'll just kind of present it, but please do make note of any comments you want to share so you can share them during breakout. So this is one example, one mock-up of the reflect and adapt scenario, and you can see it's really building on that cookbook and recipe analogy, where a team wants to basically make a pause and reflect, or reflect and adapt for their project. On the left, you see the directions for kind of painting a picture of what that scenario looks like, and the minimum of what the team should do in order to complete a reflect and adapt. And over on the right, you have the basic ingredients that you would need for any kind of reflect and adapt opportunity. So drawing from theories of change from step 2, data analysis and adaptations from step 4, and then learning outputs from step 5. Those are the key pieces. And each of those buttons would link you out to a tip sheet, as Caroline mentioned, that would go into much more detail about doing that particular subset in a lighter way, and give you sort of options and considerations for how to do that. I'll talk more about that here in just a second, but just want to leave you with this one example as a mock-up. If you go to the next slide, Caroline, this is another example, kind of leaving the recipe, the cookbook analogy to the side. This is the same sort of information, but organized differently. So this is still the reflect and adapt scenario. The scenario is outlined in the top left, and then you see the sub-steps organized by step in the open standard. So you can really clearly see which elements of the plan step, which elements of the analyze and adapt step, and which elements of the share step are fundamental to this particular scenario. And then on the right, you have some images or visuals to help paint the picture of what a reflect and adapt looks like. Which is sometimes hard to do when you're talking about project steps and project cycle. So this is another mock-up. Those buttons, once again, will be hyperlinked out to the tip sheets that walk you through in more detail what each of those sub-steps consist of and how to do them in a light way. Caroline, if you want to maybe get out of presenter mode and click on the theory of change tab in that last slide you were on, just so I can quickly walk folks through. That just hyperlinks down to slide 24, I believe. Yeah, there we go. So just to give you a very, very quick preview of what these tip sheets are starting to look like, or starting to include. Part of it will include, again, what the sub-step is and where it sits within the overall cycle of the conservation standards. In this case, theories of change, sitting squarely within the plan step. Then there's a brief description of what that particular subset entails. And then the next slide, you'll see there will be some information, some considerations for a team to think about for when to use the theories of change, what you potentially lose by not using this particular subset in your scenario. And then in the next slide, you can see there is a bit more of the basics and really how to go about using the subset in a lighter way. Okay, so that was, and then yeah, finally a criteria for good theory of change for this particular example with the theory of change tip sheet. So going back up to the breakout instruction slide, there we go, thank you. Sorry to make you jump all around the slide deck there. We're going to split you up into random groups. There's a good number of us on the line here, so we're going to break into 5 groups. And in each group, after you get whisked away to Zoom and you click on the link that takes you to your workspace, once you're in that group, the facilitators of those groups will give you a few minutes, possibly up to 10 minutes, to just individually take some time to reflect upon the mock-ups we just walked through. It was pretty quick, but now you have a chance to take your time with it and have a closer look. While you're doing that, we'd like you to provide some content or comments both on the content included in those mock-ups and also the format. So this is really our opportunity to once again come back to this group and get your input on where things are working, where things aren't. In order to provide comments, we've provided some numbered bubbles beneath each slide that you can grab hold of and drag around to whatever part of the slide you'd like to put a comment on. And then for the corresponding number down in the speaker's notes pane, you can provide your comment. So very similar to the exercise Armando walked us through at the beginning of this session. We'll be asking you to use that same process to note your comments or if you have any questions. And after you have a few minutes to think about it, note down your comments, we'll discuss collective feedback in those individual breakout groups, and then we'll come back to plenary. And I believe we have about an hour for these breakout groups, which gives us plenty of time to really tease apart these different mock-ups and get your feedback. Let me stop there. If there are any questions. Oh, I should emphasize that these are very much drafts at this point. So not polished finished products. So this is a perfect opportunity to really provide candid and clear feedback on how to improve.
So any questions, or are we ready to open up the groups?
You went through 2 mock-ups, Erica, and you'll see them in your breakout groups as well.
There are, yeah, there are two different contexts. So you'll actually have another mock-up to look at just to see things in a different scenario. And there will be a facilitator from our team in each of the groups, so we can help you
Yep.
understand what you're doing in your breakout sessions.
Okay, we ready
Right, I
to
think
open
we're
up
ready to
the
go.
rooms?
Yep.
Okay, we've got 10 or
Thank
11
you.
people in each room, and here we go.
Becky, hello again. Hi, everybody. Great to see everyone. Well, thank you for joining this session. It's going to be great to get everybody's feedback on these mock-ups. I'm going to give you a link. We have our own little area where we can put our input. So I'm going to put this directly into the chat box, this link. But while I'm doing that, if everybody could just take 5 to 10 minutes to, well, you need the link to this actually, but take 5 to 10 minutes to go through these mock-ups. I'll share my screen just to remind you of what the exercise is. And send a chat if you're having trouble accessing this. But you have 5 to 10 minutes to just scroll through what you see here, what we've shared, and think about some questions about what you like, what you don't like about the format, the content, maybe a little bit of thinking too about whether you like the analogy or you don't, and just go through each of these. You have, so Vinaya showed the reflect and adapt example. We also mocked up one that was a little more detailed where you've got more things that you might be doing. So a monitoring plan for an existing strategy. Here's the recipe card example. And then on slide 15, there is a different mock-up. So if you all can just, I'll set an alarm or a timer and just take the next 5 to 10 minutes and write down on pen and paper or on a Word document or whatever works for you, but start just kind of compiling your individual thoughts. Anyone having a problem getting in? Okay. All right.
Caroline,
No
you
particular-
mentioned
Yeah.
something about slide 15, but it only goes to slide 9, right? Did I misunderstand something?
Slide 15. Where does it say slide 15?
Well, you said something
Was it-
about slide 15. I guess
Did I? I
confirm
didn't mean to if I did.
Okay.
When maybe there was I don't recall if in the slideshow we mentioned the tips that could be found on a later slide, but they are referenced now to the correct area of slide 6 in here. And if I said something about slide 15, sorry, I didn't mean to.
And sorry, I was just asking, there's no particular like structure you want for the comments, just kind of any thoughts?
Well, right now, just write down your thoughts, but we are going to be, am I still sharing my screen? Yes. So we are going to be specifically asking for content, thoughts on the format as well as the content, but don't let that restrict you. If you have something that doesn't fit well in either of those categories, don't worry about it. Just, I think the main thing is when, after you've done your individual reflection, I'll let you know, okay, it's time to start putting your comments in, and you're just gonna then grab a bubble over here and say, I don't know, I really don't like the light bulb thing, whatever it might be, whatever your comment is. So if you have some I will put a space here maybe for higher level comments that that might not need a bubble, but you want to share. So does that make sense?
Sorry, Caroline, can I ask, so do you want us to not write in the notes just yet?
Yes,
Of
don't
the
write
actual
yet.
slide? Okay,
Yep, don't write yet.
okay,
But
thank
we
you.
will be giving you time for doing that. I just
Okay.
I want to make sure that everyone has time to kind of think through things themselves before they see what other people are writing.
Sure,
basically.
sure. And that's just for slides 2,
For all
3,
of
4,
them.
and 5, for everything. Okay, all right.
Yeah, yeah. Even take a look at the tip sheet.
Okay,
Yeah, just kind of get familiar with everything. Think about your reactions, and then we'll go through and we'll systematically make sure we cover your comments and then have some time for group discussion.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or issues getting in? I'm going to stop sharing my screen for now too, since we're all in there. How are people doing? Do you need a little more time? Are we good to go to start commenting? Okay, maybe before we dive into the more specific content, I do have a couple of questions for you all. And I'm just going to take notes in a Google Doc on this. But I'm wondering if, or our group is wondering if the analogy of a recipe is helpful or if it's distracting. So I'd love to hear from anybody on that.
Caroline, I think Brenda was just saying a couple more minutes might be useful.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just
Thank
vote,
you.
yeah,
Thanks
yeah.
for, okay. All right, well, think about that.
I'm good now, Caroline. I'm not sure if I was the only one that was slow, but I've made it through all the slides now. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for taking the time for it. All right, so like I was saying, before we dive into the individual slides, does anybody have any reactions to this question of whether the recipe analogy is helpful or if it's distracting and confusing? Maybe just go ahead and speak up.
Okay, I have some thoughts on that. I think that the analogy is brilliant to help explain like what the initiative is about and what you're trying to do. And I thought that it'd be great to present to people too. But when I saw the slide with the recipe, I did find it a little bit distracting, the analogy in terms of, you know, having the little pictures of forks and knives and things like that. So for me, and it could be a totally different interpretation that other people would have about this. Like it conceptually is awesome, but in practice on the slide, it seemed like a little too much for me.
Other people?
Yeah, I agree with.
Sorry, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Oh, thanks, Leslie. I agree with Becky's comment that it is a bit distracting. I found the same thing on, like, particularly on slide 4, for example. All of the illustrations are a little bit distracting, and then kind of, I guess, maybe take you in a direction that we don't want to. I don't know. I guess yes. Ultimately, I'm saying I found the graphics a little bit distracting as well. But I do agree that conceptually, the analogy is really good, and I think it builds on and leans into a similar analogy that we use with the conservation standards, in that they aren't a recipe, and so you can, you know, use the steps of the process that are tailored to your project's context. So I like kind of the extension of that strategy. I think it works from that perspective.
Great. And it looks like we have 2 new participants, Musa and Vladdy. I'm going to put the link to the slide deck we're working in. So go ahead and dive into that. We're having a bit of a discussion right now. So I guess other people, anyone have, I guess, let's hear from people who agree or disagree so we can kind of get a sense of where the group is overall.
Yeah, sounds good. Hi, Caroline. It's been a while. Nice to
yes,
see you.
Hello. Nice to see you.
Yeah, I agree completely with the comments so far. I was kind of relieved to hear that there's a bit of agreement there. That, you know, and my initial reaction to the recipe analogy was positive, but it's almost taking it a little bit too far, I think, with some of the icons and even the recipe up in the corner. But I thought that is a really great point that Brenda brings up, because I feel like I've heard that stated as well before, that it's not a recipe, because often when we think of a recipe, you know, it's the steps to follow. So I think I've actually heard that, you know, that it's not a recipe, that there's, you know, ways that you can adapt the approach. So that is a really interesting point that Brenda raises as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of an adaptable recipe where you need to improvise and you need to use replacement ingredients or whatever, or use a cheaper one sometimes. Maybe it is a recipe, but it's an adaptable one. I do quite like it as an analogy. I didn't find it particularly distracting, but it didn't, in terms of the individual pieces, but neither did it add loads either. I didn't find it necessary, so I was quite neutral, but I liked it. Again, I really like it as the opening concept.
Yeah, I tend to agree with everyone there, except I also think that when I look at that, like slide 2 and 4, immediately I'm drawn to the right hand side of that slide. So the colors draw me in, and those shapes of theory of change, data analysis, adaptation, learning outputs, they draw you in immediately. And I was thinking it should just be that on there. Keep it really simple. You don't need all that other text. I think text is distracted. I know our teams in Africa, they look at anything that's longer than a paragraph, thinking like, next. They're not even going to look at it. You know, I mean, if this is truly the lighter side, then it's got to be like skinny light. And then, the hyperlinks is good because then you can access more information. But I think for teams that are still just trying to understand all of the different steps and sub-steps, it's got to be really, really light. So I was drawn to the right-hand side there. I like the colors, I like the shapes. I felt like going and reading the stuff on the left was not as relevant as what's on the right-hand side.
Great. All really, really good feedback. Maybe if I could ask too, since we're talking about that right-hand side, do you find those little icons for the subset steps useful or not so much? So there's the combination. Maybe I can share my screen. There's the, and actually, I guess this is, feel free to put these notes directly into the slide deck, but we were, this is kind of getting into the formatting questions, but we were wondering, sorry, I'm trying to get to the right place to share my screen. You'd think this is the first time I've done Zoom. Here we go. Okay. So are you seeing here the reflect and adapt?
Yes.
Slide?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, these little icons here would maybe, if you've got any thoughts you want to share verbally, or if not, let's make sure you put some reflections on those in the notes here.
Hey, Caroline, this is John. So I guess actually you have a bit of a dissenting opinion. I thought overall the recipe thing worked really, really well for me. Actually, I liked it a lot. I think you could skip the plate, fork, spoon, the spoon book, and the basket icons. I do like the icons that go next to theory of change, data analysis, just because different styles of people like and dislike things. And if you don't like it, it'll roll off. And I was kind of comparing slide 2 and 3 and then 4 and 5 to figure out why I like this one so much better. And I think for me, the things I liked is it is text, but if you don't want it, you kind of, like you said, you're drawn to the right, you've got it. But if you're somebody who does kind of want to know where to start, and for me, it's like if I was looking at this, just saying here's 4 ingredients, I don't know what they mean. I would actually really want that text. And I was trying to figure out why I struggled so much with slides 3 and 5. And I think the answer is like if you read about like the visual hierarchy of information, like what is that makes people think where to go and what's important. On those other slides, the thing that grabs my mostly is these lines that are mostly empty, and then a bunch of very thick black header text that say like include scenario, and like the actual information is the last thing you see. And I found it really hard to focus on what mattered. Whereas this one, it's like, okay, I've got directions, great, they're short, they're clear. I've got 4 ingredients. It was clear to me to kind of go from left to right. And the other ones, like I felt like I should like them more, but I really struggled. So tried to dissent a bit. But yeah, I thought this was like awesome. And again, you could cut out some of the icons. I would still like it a lot. I'm ambivalent on those 3. I actually like the little recipe icon in the upper left, even though as it's not a real recipe, but then if you're a good cook, you don't follow the recipe anyway, right? It's a starting point to give you ideas.
Great. And it's great to hear the range of opinions. So that's that's exactly what we want. And also, you know, thinking about what is it too from this that you like, what is it that you don't like, what is it from this that you like or don't like, and then thinking, because ultimately we can start to combine different things from these. Like if you say, well, I really like having the cycle here, I wish the cycle were in here, we can do that, or we can try mocking that up and seeing how it is, and, you know, making sure it's not too busy. But would welcome feedback like that. And maybe let's just go in, give you guys the opportunity. I do have a few more questions, but I'd love you guys to start just going into the different slides and saying what you like and what you don't like, and what you wish were there, but's not.
And sorry, is that still just for this slide in particular, or for the whole deck?
Sure, let's start. Let's give ourselves, maybe we'll pace ourselves. So let's give ourselves 2 minutes on this slide to, let me think about the timing here. Actually, you can take up to 5 minutes on either slide 2 or 4 to say what you like and what you don't like about it. I think I need to put in some more bullet points, so I will do that right now. And just feel free to take one of these X spots and write your comments. And then again, if you want to, in case it wasn't clear, if you want to comment on the format is yellow, the content is the salmon color. Oh, you can get to those bubbles by navigating over on your right side. This little bar here will bring you down to them, and just grab a bubble and put it, you know, wherever it's appropriate if you want to make a specific comment about something.
Who's ever writing in 5? I think that's, I already snagged 5. Oh, I
For
see.
noticing
Never
that.
mind. Never mind. It's someone else is commenting on it too. What's the difference between the two colors of tags?
So the yellow is for format, the salmon colored is for content, but don't worry about that if that's, and the you'll see down below, you can scroll down to get to the salmon colored area for content, the yellow for format. But if that's too hard to navigate, just all we really care about is getting your feedback. We'll sort it out later. I've also noticed that some people are using the, +1 to say they agree with it, a point down below. So if you are super fast and can comment and read other people's comments, feel free to add your +1s.
Caroline, when I'm writing the speaker notes, do you know how to adjust the view so I can see the speaker notes more clearly? Because I'm just seeing them right down the bottom of the page.
So I'm not sure that there's that option, but let me see if this is more clear for you. So are you seeing?
Yours is coming, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you've got a
so
different view
you
from
can
me.
like when you get a hand here, that will let you adjust the size of things.
Oh, okay, got you. So just the relative size. Okay, thanks.
Yep. And then you can use, so for both the upper pane and the lower pane, there's a scroll bar here that you can use, or your down arrow. Are people, do you need another minute or two? Okay, I'm going to give you one more minute, and then we're going to move on to the next slide. I see somebody mentioned the white rectangle. We spent quite a bit of time trying to Photoshop that, so it was just in the like it wasn't sticking out like that, and then we couldn't get it and decided we weren't going to waste more time on that. But yes, great point, and we will definitely, if we go with that, it'll look more professional in the end. Okay, I'm going to keep us moving along. You can feel free to come back to this, but I want to make sure that we have time to look at every slide. So let's move down to slide 3 or 5, wherever you want to comment. But same set of questions. Love to hear what you like, don't like, format, content, anything you would suggest adjusting.
So our numbering might be getting a little bit messed up. I noticed
Don't worry
how we
about
got into auto numbering and it's changing everything.
Oh,
Sorry about that. I don't know how that happened.
which one? Where are you? And I'll
Back
try
on
to fix
slide
it.
2, I was just trying to write a note under 5, but somehow I see that because I pulled a sticky of coral color number 5.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see.
But now we're in
Yeah.
auto numbering and nothing's really exact anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't.
Yeah, let's see. Is it down in the, did
In
that
the
fix
content.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah, in the content area. Did that fix it?
I guess, but now I don't know how to write something by my 5, so I'm just going to write it for 6 instead.
Oh, okay. Actually, here, let me do something. I'm gonna give you here's a 5 for Becky.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll get out of the auto numbering. Oops.
Caroline, can you remind me what slide 3 would be, like how it complements slide 2, or would be formatted or flow or sequenced? Again, I can't recall that.
A totally separate visualization of step or of slide 2. So it's not meant to be, you wouldn't have the two together. You'd have one or the other, or maybe some hybrid of the two. So it's just, we, a couple of us in the team completely independently mock something up, and this is where we landed. So we thought, well,
I see.
So let's get, and we're trying to show you the same content or but in different formats.
Got it. Okay.
Mhm.
Caroline, I just put a message in the chat. Could you please share the slide deck again? I'm joining late,
Sure.
sorry.
Yeah. Oh, great. Good to have you, Arlene. Sorry, I didn't notice you come in.
Knock in the back door.
So Arlene, we're just, right now we're on you can go to whichever slide you would like, but we spent some time looking at slide 2 and talking about what we liked and didn't like, and some higher level comments related to that slide. And now we're doing the same thing with slide 3.
Got it, thanks.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like people are still working. Shall I give you a couple more minutes? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do that. If anybody wants to say anything verbally to it, we had a good discussion going on. So,
Caroline, I'm just thinking of it as a sort of a general comment. I'm just wondering, so for these sorts of examples we've got here, they kind of cut across a number of the steps of the cycle, don't they? So it really works well to say, well, to do monitoring and reflect on where you are or whatever, you need a bit from step 2 and a bit from step 3 and a bit from step 4. Now, and so for some other topics, are we saying that, well, it's more independent and you're just literally talking about one sub-step, so there's actually not that much to say, or is that not really where it will end up? I guess it's, I mean, so I really like the piece, particularly the first example, or the recipe example. I prefer that format, so I see that. I'm just thinking, so when you put all of these recipe cards together, what's it going to look like? How many recipe cards are there, and so on?
Well, so yeah, that's a great question. That kind of gets, I think there's, well, the time and the resources we have for this particular effort are limited, but we'd like to be able to. So these are scenarios where we decided we couldn't really cover the full universe of every potential context people might find themselves in. So if we thought of enough common scenarios, maybe people could find themselves in one of those scenarios. And then just like in the recipe analogy, you might have to adapt a bit because your scenario might be a little different. Maybe you're doing a reflect and adapt, but you are really just focusing you don't have a lot of data, say, I don't know. So you're going to just really focus more on the theories of change and kind of and some reflections on those. So the idea is, I'm going to share my screen again if I don't think I am. Right now, our thinking is that we would put together these cards and develop the content for the cards. So the tip sheets for theories of change, for data analysis, adaptations. So making sure that we have tip sheets for anything any ingredient, anything that's part of the recipe. And then focus on these, I don't know how many scenarios we have here, but focus on these as our starting point. And then hopefully over time, this will become something that the community can say, well, I don't see myself here. We need a scenario that is X, Y, and Z. And so either they can develop it or we can work with them to develop that scenario. And then, if people prefer to enter at I am just looking for light ways to do theories of change, they just go straight to the tip sheet for theories of change. So I see,
Yeah.
I guess,
I get that.
entryway
So in a
points.
way, the package that you have is there's kind of a tip sheet for each sub-step. In fact, there are a few more than that because, like on the things which are theories of change and smart objectives, that's all within the same sub-step, isn't it? Within the cycle. So some tip sheets might relate to equate to one sub-step. Some tip sheets might be that there might be 3 or 4 tip sheets relating to a sub-step, and then
exactly
the rest. Then the scenarios point you to those tip sheets. Yeah. Okay. No, I think that helps clarify how it comes together.
Caroline, it was really helpful to see those scenarios that you shared. And I was pleased to see that one of the scenarios is like the full plan, which is a question that we get frequently from practitioners. That spreadsheet that you have on its own, like minus the scenarios at the top, just a simple template like that has all the CS steps and then those drop-down menus for like include, potentially include, or not include, I think on its own could be helpful for the like adapting just as a product on its own for adapting the scenarios that do get published, and then because those will have to be adapted as well to be specific to project context. And I think it's a really simple tool, but I think it could be a really helpful one. I'm not sure if that's on the list of products.
That's actually really good to hear because I think there are a couple of us who feel that and a couple who don't feel that. Think it's like too techy and too so it's good to hear. I mean, I think obviously if this became a product, we would make it look prettier, but it's good to hear that the spreadsheet itself is useful.
I took a screenshot of it because I totally wanted it.
Okay.
That is really interesting, isn't it? That is because I must admit I've been in one of those who really quite likes that thing. So yeah, I'm encouraged by that.
Okay. All right. So we are we have another 15 minutes, I think, for our session. So I'm going to navigate us. Well, I guess, does anybody want to share any comments from the overall comments from either of the formats that you looked at?
I guess just one thing I put it in writing, but I mean, I think what I'm really struggling with on kind of the slide 3 is like all the things that draw your attention the most don't matter. So there's 2 very complex dashboards that wouldn't apply to a light or simple standards. People aren't going to do that, and it doesn't tell you how to do it. And then those really big, bold headers like include, scenario, reflection, adapt. So it's the thing that's the hardest to focus on is the text and the white text in the green, in the colored boxes. And it's just, to me, it's very ironic that like all the things, I find a hard time focusing on what I need to know the most. Might just be me, but.
So John, let's do something really quick here. Like, what if we got rid of that and we, sorry, my computer is running a little, it's not recognizing that I'm trying to, oh, it's frozen. Well, if somebody wants to, I guess, go in there, John, if you want to like propose some changes, I just created a duplicate but for some reason I can't right now interact with it. My screen's a bit frozen.
Sure.
But yeah, that's great.
I'll take, sorry.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I actually like the visuals. I'm not certain if 2 are necessary, but for me, and I made a comment about this, the visual like helped me like see what that scenario might be about. And maybe that's just because I know about making dashboards. And so I could see, okay, that would be like it just, the visual helped me understand what this scenario was for, what type of user it was for. But I then thought that on the next slide like that, number 5, the visual didn't help me, didn't model what this scenario was about as well. So my comment was, if you're sticking with visuals, which personally I liked, there has to be a visual which really like locks in for sure that what that scenario is modeling. So if it didn't model anything for John and maybe, 95% of the users, then maybe just, and that's going to be the case with all visuals, they're not going to speak to everybody, that maybe visuals then just become unnecessary in general, because unless they're going to really speak to someone, then they aren't helpful.
Right. Or speak to the majority of the people. We're probably, I mean, you can see here just in our small sample, not everybody likes the same thing. So we won't be able to please everybody, but if we can get a sense of what works for most people, I think that will be
I think the visuals on slide 3, I was just a little bit confused whether or not, if this content, the writing's really small, that we'd actually be reviewing. Is it just an example of what the stuff can get?
It's just, yeah. So honestly, it was just intended to be like, and not even to suggest that these would be the actual visuals, but rather to say,
I see.
Like when you, we even still kind of had the recipe idea in mind, but when you flip through a cookbook and you can see what your product is going to look like,
right?
And you're drawn to that like I always want to cook the what I see in the picture because it looks so good. So that was kind of the idea behind it, but recognizing these are just placeholder images.
Okay.
And would welcome any, if that does speak to you guys, that concept, then would also welcome suggestions for the actual visual or the types of visuals to look for.
Yeah, I mean, if I may, I kind of feel like there's something in between. I hear what you're saying, John. My exact note was for slides 3 and 5. I hate these, except for on slide 3. That dashboard is exactly what all the field officers, all the managers that we deal with at the Land Wildlife Trust and ICF want to see. That's what they want to see. They want to know what the end product is before they buy into the process. So I like it, and I don't think it can fit on one recipe card though. It's probably going to be, here's the recipe and directions on the front, turn it over. This is what you get when you do this properly. you know, and that to me would be really great because it's hard to sell this to field officers that, you know, don't have time to do this well. And I mean, I know that's why we help them do it, but when we are thinking of the lighter conservation standards and what I said earlier on, it's got to be really light in order for them to engage with it. You know, they'll always say that, you know, their field work is more important than having to think about working strategically. Having been a field officer myself for a long time, I understand the sentiment. So yeah, it's just to cut down on the text in general would be great, without losing too much content. But I really like the idea of the recipe on one side, and then maybe a couple of like, this is what you get if you do it well on like the other side. So they would turn that card over. And I'm thinking of physical cards. I think Erica asked in the plenary, is this only electronic? That will be a problem because, you know, a lot of people aren't going to have access to the laptop when they, you know, when they're out in the field doing something. They might want to quickly refer to it and have it printed out, laminated as like a little small card with, you know, it's ring bound in the corner. They can quickly flip to it. But that would be nice if they were to do that. I think of like wild dog identity kits. We didn't have them electronically. We had them printed out that we could quickly flip to when we're looking at the animal in the field. So I think like it's great when you conceptualize this, but we got to think, we're sold on this. How do we sell more field officers on it? It's a very selfish point that I'm making here, because it'd be great if we get to that at some point, so that I can sell it to, you know, the 150 field officers and managers that, you know, that have to help them through the conservation standards. And one day in Marathi share too. You know, also get them hooked on, you know, these little pro tips. That's a different discussion. Thanks.
I just want to clarify, like, if this was for like the broader standards, or if this was something where people were going to go that deep, I would totally agree. And I think the point of how to sell it is another really good point. To me, the only reason I'm harping on this is like those dashboards, those are hundreds of thousands of dollars to million. I mean, TNC, we spent several $1 million developing that. And so to your point, it's great to sell it, but we pulled a lot of effort to that kind of thing of like, oh, we need these dashboards, as opposed to like, let's start with the basics. So maybe it's like one pie chart or something. I don't know, but then you're right, I wouldn't sell it. So I don't know how to get at it. Yeah. We have $2,000 to give you to create the same dashboard. Yeah, I hear what you're saying there, John. Thanks.
All right, we have only, this is great feedback. I wish we could spend more time talking about it, but we've only got about a little over 5 minutes left. Could we now move to the tip sheet? And there, this is a very rough mock-up, as you can see. I don't even know that I would focus too much on the content, though. Feel free to if you want to, but would be great to get your reactions to any of this. You can, any slides 6 through 9. And yeah, you can share it verbally or just start. I see some people are already in there adding things, but.
I have to run to another meeting, so I'm going to sign off now, but it was great to see everyone and participate in this discussion with all of you. And special thanks, Caroline, for the team for sharing an update with us and providing an opportunity for comment.
Well, thank you very much, Brenda, for joining. Can I drop the link to the evaluation into the chat box? Sorry, I just need to grab it from up here. Copy.
You know what? Okay. Can I grab? I should be able to find that too, in the agenda.
I think so, but here you go. I just got it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Great input.
Got it. Thanks. I look forward to hearing more updates. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Caroline, to be clear, are the tip sheets or they're a package? Are they? You would have all of those together. That's all. Is that for the 4 sheets makes 1 tip sheet, or are these options?
Yeah, so we decided to put, I think we're still working on these 4 sheets make 1 tip sheet. And the tip sheets it was previously in a Google Doc, and we moved it in here in part to keep everything together, but in part for format ideas. And I mean, it might be great to hear some feedback on, is it useful to have this split into 4 different slides, or would you prefer to have it all in one document or one? Maybe I'll back up for a moment too. Ultimately, the slides are just a mock-up, and we need to figure out, I think, over the longer term, whether these become a website, whether we use something like Adobe Spark, or we use, some other, I've forgotten the names of some of the other programs, but to present it in a way that you can kind of navigate easily, you scroll through and stuff. But for now, it'd be great to hear if people would prefer something that was in a single scrolling place versus having the 4 different slides. And maybe if you feel free to share those thoughts right now, I'll just capture that.
So sorry, Caroline, probably I'm confused because I came late, but so now we're stepping back to step 2, where a team would be thinking about developing a theory of change. And this would be, maybe you could set
I'll
the
jump in
context.
I'll jump in and share the context. So, so if you are doing, can you see my screen right now? Did I share? Okay. So if you're working on a monitoring plan for an existing strategy, you're going to need to do several different things. One of them is a theory of change. So all of these would link out to different tip sheets, or different basically explanations of what is the theory of change, what are different options for doing it in a lighter fashion, what do you gain and lose from these different options. So what you have here in this deck is just a mock-up for one of those. So if this is if you need a theory of change, then you would come to this tip sheet or set of cards that form the tip sheet and go through each piece. It'd tell you what a theory of change is. I actually think this slide personally is misplaced. I think this should come after like every time there's a different option of doing it lighter, you should talk about when you might use that and what you would lose. I think we're still kind of figuring that out. But the concept of helping people understand when options are useful and what you might lose. And then some guidance on the basics. So what's one way to get a theory of change going quickly? Go to the Conservation Actions and Measures library and look for your particular strategy. And so there'll be more detail about how you would do that and how you can use it as a way to start developing your theory of change. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that really helps. So I understand then, going back to the recipe card, that would there be, is the intent then there be a tip sheet like this under each one of those data analysis at a
yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Each one is going to have a tip sheet. Yeah. And we have
great, that helps.
Just another, I think we could take a couple of minutes before I close the breakout room. So does anybody have any, I guess, concluding thoughts or anything, burning thoughts you want to share with everybody? And Mariana, if you are able, oh, no, is Mariana, I don't think we have Mariana in the, I don't know why I'm getting a chat from.
Because
oh no, wait, there you are, Mariana, sorry.
Yeah, we just
see
returned.
everybody. Oh, great. Oh.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. I just have to run to another meeting, but thanks for the call.
Okay, we're back in plenary now.
My team ended 1 minute earlier, and we just
Oh, okay. Okay,
jumped
great.
back.
Mariana, if you are still here, could I put the link to the evaluation form in the chat box for you to
Sure.
fill out? Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. I'll do it quickly.
Great, thanks so much. And I guess I'm gonna broadcast a message to everybody else closing rooms. And while that's out there, I think we have 60 seconds if anyone from my group had anything else they wanted to share.
Just this is massively helpful. I mean, we're nitpicking all the things we'd like to see that are different opinions, but I think overall this is a huge step forward. Like I still love the recipe cards so much. If you had them today, I would use them today. So really want to emphasize how much I appreciate all the work here, and it's very inspiring.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
I just want to echo that entirely. This is exactly what I need to get those last few stubborn EWT and people on board, and yeah, so this is great. Definitely. I mean, the recipe cards, it's an analogy everyone can understand. So yeah, I really like it too.
Awesome. Great to hear. Well, we are going to have a little bit of time too for overall reflections once we get back. It looks like most people are back now.
Caroline, you're doing another session, this exact same one with another set of people?
Yes.
So are you gonna like synthesize across all of it and give some feedback?
Yeah, we're gonna have a little bit of work to do.
Yeah, I bet.
Yes, but yeah, that is the intent. That other one is a more convenient time for UK and Asia. So it'll be Will and Vinaya leading on that.
And the synthesis that you do, will that be available to us again or?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah, absolutely. I think we'll be sharing everything as we go along. All right, welcome back, everybody. We had a really great discussion in our breakout room and super helpful input and feedback. I hope that was the case for everyone. I'm sure it was. I'm gonna turn it over to Ashley to kind of do some of that higher level reflections.
Great, yeah, and I know we only have about 15 minutes for this, but I encourage you all to jump back into that Google slide doc. Caroline, if you could just go to the next slide.
Okay, yep. Can someone put the link into?
I'm doing that, yep. If you
okay, great, thank you.
Yep, next slide. Okay, so we're just going to cover 3 high-level reflection questions together here based on your breakout groups. How could you see yourself using these products in the future once they're developed? And then over the long term, is there anything else you'd like to see? And then finally, if you've got any resources, examples that you haven't shared with us yet, that would be really helpful. I know we had some really great potential resources shared in our breakout group, so I'd love to see some of those links in there if you're able to share them. So we can, if you meet us in there, it starts on slide 30, it's color coded. So I'm going to give you all just maybe 3 minutes to kind of go through and add in your comments to how you could see yourself sharing these products. You can skip down to slide 33 if you want to respond to the question over the long term, is there anything else you'd like to see? And you can skip down to slide 36 if you'd like to add your resources. So start adding your thoughts there. I'll give you some time and then I'll open it up for us to kind of share. So if you would like to share how you'll use these products, please be ready to share that with us. Okay, I'm going to start calling on a couple folks for the first question, but if you want to be answering the following questions, do feel free. So in terms of how you could see yourself using these products, does anybody want to share how they might use these products moving forward? The need has already popped up and you'd like to share that with us. You can feel free just to go off mute or raise your hand. Up to you.
I'm very excited about this. I can already see myself using this for, we're actually in the middle of a strategic planning process for my business unit with the Nature Conservancy. And I'm already getting so much out of this because we were given 6 months to develop a strategic plan. And that's extremely difficult to do. And so having these ideas, I had to basically take the Nature Conservancy's conservation by design and sort of, pick and choose out of it and make my own lighter version. And so having this more formal guidance will be extremely useful to me. And I already see myself using the reflect and adapt products, the scenario, using the products in the reflect and adapt scenario for when we do a review of our strategic plan in a year or so.
Great. Good to hear. Anybody else want to share on this particular question?
This is Benoit here. Sometimes I have to give like a conservation standard 101 presentation, a 1 hour presentation, and like I adapted the CCNet products to my own presentation, but this is actually good tools to explain when it's time to really implement a project with a new team. So these tools will be very, very useful.
Awesome. Great to hear. And David, I see you have your hand raised as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think this would be very useful for onboarding new staff that are completely unfamiliar with conservation standards. That's a struggle that we have with trying to explain all of the steps and what this means, and then we flood them with Mirati share too. So like this lighter version is essential. And I mean, as Erica is also on the talk knows, we struggle with this with onboarding new staff. This is really, really useful, and not even just for new staff, just for like all of our staff members, that flitter in and out of actually applying the conservation standards. This is a really good reminder and say it's not intimidating, it's not confusing. Here's a recipe card. There's 10 of them. You can flip through it in a minute. Yeah.
Great feedback. Quinn?
Yeah, I was just thinking I'd probably use this just to go through as inspiration for ways I might permanently change the way I coach. I'm certain that there's ways to make things more efficient. Everybody's tired of planning by the end of a planning session, and there's got to be ways to make it. I see that as the biggest barrier to this stuff. And so I imagine looking through this, there'll be ideas of ways that I can trim things, permanently. So that's what I'm excited about.
Great feedback. Okay, well, this has been really helpful in reading these responses on slides 30 through 32. It's really helpful for us also because we want to, practice user-centered design here. So knowing exactly how you think you're going to use the products is going to help us as we continue to develop them. So if you haven't had a chance to add your thoughts in there, please do. We'll be the organizing team is going to be looking this over and incorporating that into how we design. So I really appreciate all of the feedback. So let's move on to the next question. Over the longer term, is there anything else you'd like to see? Because I think that would also be helpful to discuss a bit. So in hearing what we're working on so far, was there anything that stood out to you that you really want to see coming out eventually that you think is really important for us to have access to?
You may have this already, I might be ignorant, but I was thinking even just like some of the templates in Miro or Mural that we've seen already this week would be really helpful to say, like, here's, we got all the legends, here's an example that shows you a finished one, but it's not editable, and like just kind of like how to block out those boards. I'm always surprised how much work it is to create those from scratch every time. So that would be like one really great one.
Right.
I think the ability to build your own recipe or choose your own adventure, because these recipes or these scenarios, like for like what I'm working on for different species, there's so much information that already exists. So I really have to evaluate what exists and then see what I need. And then that's how I build out what kind of process I need to develop around that. And so being able to pull the tools that I want and kind of create my own recipe guide for a team to take and process or go through the whole process with would be super helpful. Yeah.
Maybe could I respond to that quickly?
Yep.
That came up in our discussion too in our group, and we talked a little bit about there could be a couple different ways people end up at a tip sheet. They might end up at a tip sheet because they start with a scenario or recipe and they see themselves in it, but they might end up at a tip sheet because they say, I just need a lighter way to do results chains, theories of change. And so they're just going to take that theory of change thing. So I think over time, we're hoping that for all the different, if you recall that spreadsheet I showed you, but for all those different components, we might have lighter ideas, lighter suggestions, and then people could grab what's useful to them.
Mm-hmm. So good to know that's the direction to move with it. Okay, any other long-term products or tools that you'd like to see related to this later CS? Maybe you need to think about it a little bit. Yeah, Christina.
In our group with you, Ashley, we were thinking about, if it was possible, dreaming a bit here to incorporate artificial intelligence into, how to organize things. And let's say, we were saying, just like in a recipe, you look for the stars, like, oh, if it has 1 star, it's not good, people didn't really like it. But if it has 5 stars, you know that your peers said, this is a really good recipe. And also, the adding comments so that you can read if people made tweaks and said, I changed the grams of flour because then it was better. And so if we had the ability to incorporate that, so we could really tap into the collective wisdom and that, community learning, that would be awesome. I know it takes us to another level of preparation, but I thought that was really cool if we could do that.
Still worth dreaming. Okay, so I know we only have 1 minute left for this section, so I just want to give us one moment to remind you that starting on slide 36, if you have additional resources or examples that you haven't shared yet, we would love to see them. Anything that's worked well for you, please include that here. And if you're able to kind of include why that additional resource was useful and what particularly about it you liked, that would be really helpful for us as well as we design this. So yes, please add in, and this is open to you. So if you came up with some thoughts later today, feel free to come back in here and add them in. Okay. Any other questions from the organizing team? Any last thoughts, or ready to move on to next steps, maybe? Okay, next steps it is. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Ash. So if we can go to the next one, we're going to just tell you a little bit where we are. We're not in December, as we pointed out. We're in November. We got a little bit before that. But we're finishing those draft priority products and getting your input. We'll be looking at all the feedback, and thank you so much, the feedback from the working groups and the breakout groups. And this feedback here on slides up to 38 is awesome, is great. This will help us a lot. And we will be looking at this feedback and then integrating the feedback into our products. And from then we will have by early 2022 finalizing products, and we will get some committee feedback for this guidance, and hopefully share it with all of you on a set of, I don't know how we will do it yet. Probably we love webinars in this virtual world, but we will be sharing this with all of you, definitely. So with that, I would just like to thank you all, thank my colleagues who helped us prepare this, and I think it went pretty well, but this is my bias. So we want to get your, we want to get your ideas on, or your evaluation on how it came out and if it was a good session and so on. So please follow the link to the evaluation form that Marcia has just posted in the Zoom chat box. And I hope you have a great day, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Thank you so much. Some final words?